Aujourd'hui, je vais parler de a phrase that's been bugging me ever since I've heard it about 20 years ago, and that is living wage. So what is it, and why do I think it is completely comical that we even talk about it? Hey, hey, XenPuck here. So back in the days, oh boy, decades ago, right, when I was in college, I heard the bleeding die-hard liberals, or rather probably more like aspiring liberals in the form of college students, protest in our college quad about this concept of a living wage. I think at the time they were asking something for like $9 an hour, which was almost double the minimum wage at the time. Now, these days, the federal minimum wage has risen to about $7.25, but all the cool kids are now clamoring for that $15 an hour as an alternative, right? Especially in cities. And yet, according to the most popular of the living wage calculators, via the gloriously prestigious Institute of MIT, with all the various geographical variations and number of children and dependents in presumably single-earner households being taken into account, a living wage will need to be around more than $50 an hour. Wow. That's a huge difference, right? That's 7x what the federal minimum wage is. How did we get here, and why is it that over time somehow we're getting further and further from the mythical goal? Okay. I'll link the article that set me off on the subject below, right? Don't worry if you don't have a New York Times subscription to read it, because I'll quote some of the more ridiculous part of the article, because honestly, I think the idea of a living wage is like that of a hover car, right? Do I want it? Absolutely, sounds awesome. Is it ever gonna happen? Not a chance in hell, okay? At least not in the way that our collective imagination would have it, right? So let me break it down to several digestible pieces. Number one, right, first we have to define our terms. And since the MIT living wage calculator is apparently the most popular or well thought out, let's hear what people complain about to the creator of said calculator in terms of whether her way is good enough, right? I'll also link the actual calculator in the description so you can play around with it. And I think what she includes actually is what most people would consider necessities, right? With maybe a little bit of extra for things like civic engagement, aka, going to have fun on the cheap. And a rather nebulous category of other. Again, just a bit, not much, so I'm not mad about that, right? What I am much more fascinated by are the feedback notes that she gets, right? From regular people who admonishes her for not including things like going to restaurants once a month, saving for retirement, taking a vacation. What about when you drop your phones or have to get an emergency babysitter and parking tickets? Holy Lord. This type of feedback blows my mind because once again, I'm just going to compare this list of what I would call more like demands to my personal experience, okay? Restaurants once a month? I think I can recall going to the restaurant when I was a child, maybe like once a year, if that. What about vacations? I mean, I guess, when I first came to this country, I was, not even a teen yet, right? So we did, go around the country and look at some touristy sites. But once, I realized that I'm here for good, middle school and high school, during those periods, 6 years or so, don't think I went on a single family vacation, okay? And things like dropped phones or parking tickets? What? I mean, I hope that if you're poor, you'd be treating your devices really carefully, right? Like a $10 cover would probably do wonders for your phone, okay? I know personally, when I first had a car as a young person, I was terrified of parking tickets because they're so expensive. And guess what? Because of that fear, I've never gotten a single ticket. Because I know I use my eyes and I look around where I'm parking. I mean, no offense to the blind, of course, right? Good God, use all of your senses? I don't think anybody needs to be Spider-Man to avoid parking tickets. Main point is this: none of these complaints are actual needs, okay? Would I have preferred to have gone on vacation as a kid? Absolutely. But somehow, I still became a relatively well-adjusted adult without such luxuries, right? not part of a living wage, at least in how I would define it, right? My second point, right, which is that I think living wage is just pure idealism. Now, this has some real problems associated with it, right? My favorite quote from the New York Times article is near the end. I'll read it, right? In quotes, right? Gompers argued in 1898 that a living wage should be sufficient to maintain an average-sized family in a manner consistent with whatever the contemporary local civilization recognizes as indispensable to physical and mental health, or as required by the rational self-respect of human beings. Whoa. Okay, so more than 100 years ago, some dude argued that a point of a living wage is to make sure people can live similar to their contemporaries. That's what I gathered from the statement. But with the conditional statement, that's more interesting, which is the standard is defined as indispensable to someone's physical or mental health. What's indispensable exactly these days? Is a smartphone indispensable? Is internet access indispensable? I'm talking about home internet access, right? After all, a smartphone is just a very convenient computer, right? And you can use a computer at the library. You can also, by the way, get on the internet at the library for free. So what about indispensable in terms of physical health? Why should only rich people have Pelotons? If I have a budget, home bike that's not online connected, wouldn't I mentally feel inadequate when I know there are classes with much more attractive coaches available online? I jest, of course, but my point remains. The average expectation of the 21st century is vastly, vastly different, right? The deluge of information can make it seem like, or at least anybody who's up on the internet, it could make it seem like we would expect all the things. Heck, these days I'm surprised that if my packages don't come within 2 days, is that indispensable? Now, I'm sure my definition of what's indispensable to my personal physical and mental health is totally different than someone else's. And who the heck is the government to tell me what it should be, or anybody besides me, right? And if there's no consensus on that, how the heck would we determine what's a baseline, much less a ceiling in terms of what it means to live? Okay, really live, exactly. Now, my third and final point I want to mention is how this discrepancy between living and subsisting changes over time, right? After all, I've said that when I was a kid, we didn't have much, right? We didn't eat out, we didn't go on vacations, and because I didn't have those things to begin with, I didn't really miss them either, right? I mean, it was just baked into my early conditioning, right? An effect of that type of conditioning in these days would be, I don't choose to wander around the mall window shopping unless I have something specific in mind to purchase, right? I do this because for the majority of my early life, a random splurge was simply not possible, right? So far, I seem like I would probably be happy with MIT's living wage calculator's list of criteria. After all, I didn't need much when I was just coming into adulthood, right? However, I would say that now that I'm just about past my young adulthood period, my expectations have changed, right? To me, I still don't care about a majority of luxury goods, and that's in line with a basic living wage type of definition. Yet, these days, I want to expand my mind for my mental health, right? I would like to be thought of as a global citizen, and I envy the multiculturalism of a place like Western Europe. So should my living wage then account for my desire for mastery for a few more languages? What about just the fact that I want to debate about public policy that affects living wage, like in making this video, like this Gompers guy, who I quoted in the last segment, right? Should the liberal arts education that was denied to me as a youth be provided to me now? Because I feel like it could be considered indispensable for my own, satisfaction. In other words, if I wanted Latin lessons, but also wanted to be a brewmaster in a monastery in order to really, live rather than just subsist, who the heck can equitably tell me that I'm in the wrong or that I don't deserve these things, especially if I'm not judging someone else's desire for, say, a BMW sports coupe, right? By the way, I know plenty of dudes who think that would be an indispensable part to their health in one way or another. And I guarantee that was learned behavior rather than some innate idea about what it means to live, okay? Yeah, so in conclusion, now I think it is absolutely noble that people in the first world want literally everyone to live, not just subsist, right? Wow, awesome, great goal. Maybe get everybody to subsistence first, right? I mean, the USA doesn't even have subsistence for everybody. We got a whole bunch of hobos, so walk before we run, eh? And then presumably after that we can walk. The goal changes to live. Let's just make it easy. If the calculator from MIT is the one New York Times tells me that's the one that I should follow, why not just define living wage as, hey, whatever amount of money it would take to get everybody in the country an education at MIT or capable of being hired and published at the New York Times. Wouldn't that be something? Anything less surely isn't acceptable. I mean, wouldn't it be just to not provide the same opportunities to everyone? Surely, when that's done, our definition of what it means to live will move even further along, perhaps to a point where we're all aiming to be master chefs or botanists or real Renaissance men reborn. After all, isn't that the real goal? Isn't the mastery of all disciplines the only true way to live? Oh boy, how much is that going to cost? Think about it. I don't think $50 an hour is remotely going to cut it. Okay, rant over. What do you guys think? What do you think a living wage is? And what do you think really qualifies as living? Because to me, the problem is that there's no end to the level of escalation as to what living means. Cheers, I'll approach it.